Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Philip Scholtes, Managing Director for Program Development and Technical Cooperation at UNIDO, who will be moderating this session. Philip, please, the show is yours.
Thank you, Fatou, and I would like to start with a warm welcome to you all, and look forward to an interactive debate now during the second session of the event. As was just announced, my name is Philippe Scholtes. I'm responsible for all technical cooperation activities of UNIDO. And in a few numbers, that is a portfolio of 830 projects scattered in over 100 countries around the world, and with a total face value in excess of $1 billion. It is all grant technical assistance, and it is all capacity building services that we deliver to about 100 countries around the world. So with this as a background, my role will be to moderate the debates in this session that is about interregional strategies under the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So if I may give a few words of introduction to explain why this particular subject is so relevant for us at UNIDO. UNIDO, for those of you who come from outside, is a specialized agency of the UN system dedicated to the promotion of inclusive and sustainable industrial development. And we were somehow very encouraged last year when the global community chose to, when adopting Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, chose to assign one specific goal to infrastructure, innovation, and industry. So industry is right in the center of the Sustainable Development Goals now, and particularly in its relation with infrastructure and innovation. And this is why we see the initiative of the One Belt, One Road as strategically critical as far as UNIDO is concerned, because we are talking of a large number of countries. I mean, I've read that if you sum up all the countries along the route of the One Belt, in Holland, that you get
荷兰的鹿特丹来数
probably concentrating between them a very large share of the global population and the global GDP. And these are countries that are with operating under different political systems, different levels of development, different levels of technological capabilities, and different level of human resources, of financial resources. And it is very important for us to see how we can turn these differences into an asset when it comes to fostering sustainable development along the One Belt, One Road. It's also very important because right when we speak here, we have a delegation working on the urban aspects of development, considering the massive drive that is taking place all over the world, and particularly in developing countries, from the rural areas to the urban areas, and that places severe pressures on the ecosystems, on the economies of new urban centers. And it is important for us to see how we can deploy a range of technical services that will support municipal authorities in facing the challenges that are ahead of them in the future. And for this, we welcome the fact, again, that this session will look at infrastructure as well as municipal urban environments, because, again, this is squarely in the heart of the preoccupations of UNIDO at this point, that is in the heart of the SDGs, and it is an agenda that will shape UNIDO's work for the foreseeable future, certainly for the next 15 years. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the keynote speaker, who will then, Dr. Franco Pan from Oxford University, who will be giving you an overview of the One Belt, One Road initiative from more of a cultural background, from the rich exchanges that it affords amongst populations, amongst different cultures, in the different countries which are crossed by the road. So Dr. Frankopan, you have the floor, please. After the keynote address, then we will proceed with a series of interventions by an eminent panel of distinguished speakers here, who will be given 5 minutes each to explain their reaction to the keynote address, their way of contributing perhaps to the One Belt, One Road initiative. And we will try and see the guidance, if we have the possibility of interacting with the audience immediately after the presentations by the individual speakers. We will try and see how that can inspire some of the actions that different UN agencies here, different partners, development funds, public institutions, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Austria, and a number of institutions that have a global mandate here that are represented in this panel and who would like to hear your views on how to move ahead with this important agenda. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schultes, Excellencies, distinguished guests and colleagues. I'm extremely grateful to you today for asking me to come and talk. As a historian, I spend most of my time trying to explain why the past is important to understand the future. And for all of you trying to plan ahead, trying to look what the next years and decades will bring for the cities along the One Belt, One Road initiative, it's important, I think, to reflect on some of the problems, challenges, and also some of the similarities from the past. Because historians will tell you that the study of our civilization is exactly that, the study of cities, civilization from the Latin word for city, civis, and citizens. We define ourselves as animals, as a species, by the way we're able to cooperate with each other in super sophisticated ways. Multilingual, multi-religious, multi-climatic zones, and so on. And looking back at the past, it seems to me that the most important parts of the world one would start by examining would be these cities along the Silk Roads and the One Belt, One Road countries. This is not the future. This is a regalvanization of a past that used to exist. This was the crucible of civilization. These areas that are being knitted together again today are ones that have a long and proud culture. And a historian will tell you that, of course, cities are important for the kinds of challenges that have been flagged in the agenda papers and the briefing papers for this conference, things like global inequality, things like gender balances, and of course production of GDP and the economic capacity they have. But cities, of course, are also home for scholars and for culture and for architecture and for, of course, for innovation. So although cities are fundamentally important as honeypots where the physical activity and exchange between individuals produces a very high level of economic intensified exchange, and therefore it produces economic products, there are other goods and ways of looking at what the products and results of these exchanges are as well. Above all, the exchange of ideas and beliefs, as well as those fundamental economics that we've been talking about already this morning. And in that sense, the fact that the 5 posts of the One Belt, One Road initiative, led by China, and the 2030 Agenda and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals allied, I think tells us something extremely important about what it is that we are trying to achieve, not just in this region, but across the world. And I suppose one starting point, and Dr. Schulte just alluded to it, just what is included within these One Belt, One Road countries. Well, I thought about plotting out the names of those cities who are represented here at this conference. I thought that was unfair on some of those cities who are not here. But it's intentionally vague, I think, how we're trying to understand this part of the world, not just in the 21st century, but in the past. There was no such thing as a Silk Road. There was no start point or end point. There was no east, there was no west, there was no north or south. This was a web of connections. The word was designed in the 19th century by Ferdinand von Richthofen as Seidenstraßen in the plural, a web, a connection of links between peoples and above all between cities. The cities were were studded across the spine of Asia and across the littoral, across the maritime areas too. allowing for both low-level local exchange and, of course, the much longer distance, typically of high-value goods. But this looseness, I think, is important because this One Belt, One Road, although it looks to us new, it's not. This is the Roman One Belt, One Road, 2,000 years ago. You'll recognise the same maritime, the same routes linked across Asia. And in fact, it's not really fair to call this Roman because the Romans were one beneficiary of this kind of trade, but so is every single point along this network. It just so happens that this is described from maps written 2,000 years ago in ancient Rome. So we're looking at something which is has an important backdrop. Those of you working on the One Belt, One Road in the future, I advise to look back on the rich way in which we've cooperated before across these areas, because by and large the areas and the regions of the One Belt, One Road, those central ones, central countries, are not paid any attention to in our histories. They're not much spoken about in China, they're not much spoken about here in Western Europe or in the United States, despite the obvious importance, opportunities and profound challenges that we have today in places like Iraq and Syria, with the re-emergence of Iran, with Russia, with South Asia, with India and Pakistan, in the Gulf, and of course in the Central Asian republics and the Caucasus as well. This is a fundamentally important, potentially very fragile zone, as well as one that will help shape what the world looks like in the 21st century. If we get it right, if you get it right at this conference and conferences like this in the future, it will be for the good of all mankind. When things go wrong in this part of the world, they have effects on all of us. And of course, this heart of the world was the point at which the East and the West first connected around about the time of Jiang Qian, who goes to explore beyond the mountains and deserts that protect China from the outside world. And the first thing that Jiang Qian was interested in was in cities. He was interested in what goods there were to trade. He was interested in what the people were like, how to deal with them, what their challenges they presented to China, and what opportunities they offered for trade. And that is a fundamental point of interest for all travellers, all merchants, all holy people, all travellers who've crossed this spine of Asia. We heard already the name of Marco Polo, but we could add to that Ibn Battuta from the Arab world, but also many, many visitors who are constantly bedazzled by what they see and are keen to cooperate. This idea of win-win that we hear in the 21st century is why Asia functioned and why Asia was the central economic hub of the world until around about 1500. And that's a different story about why that starts to change. But the cooperation has lasted for millennia. This reawakening of contacts is one that is very important, because we know that prosperity brings with it all sorts of other valuable results, such as tolerance, such as sophisticated ways of communicating, such as the sharing of ideas. It's not just about economic growth as well. Cities and their populations are enriched by culture, let us not forget that. And some of the jewels that we see, and of course by ideas. So I have here across the One Belt, One Roads of the religious communities, where you can see the activities of Buddhism, of Hinduism, of Islam, of Judaism, of Christianity fanning out. Because when people in different cities communicate with each other and travel, they bring with them ideas, above all, about the meaning of life. But the barriers that enable people to travel are different today than having to cross the deserts on camels, bringing luxury goods with you. I was in the western deserts of China 2 weeks ago, and I could get there from central Oxford in 24 hours, more or less, rather than crossing 800 miles by desert, this kind of terrain. This has more or less become removed as an obstacle to the way in which we are able to ship goods, whether it's by train, whether it's by aeroplane, or by road. The challenges that our ancestors had are different. But here, some of the results from Herat, from Samarkand, this Herat in Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and then Isfahan. These pearls were built because our ancestors worked out how to cooperate, how all of them had to win together. Those same principles that you're talking about here of sustainability, cooperation, good governance, and of infrastructure investment would have been familiar to your equivalents many hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. And at the core of the ability to work together was long-term planning, above all as cities grew. And their growth here, I've chosen at random more or less examples from Constantinople or Istanbul, from Xi'an, from Lahore in the Punjab, and from Damascus, the kinds of prestige associated with getting things right, because the benefits of cooperation and of trade are important to demonstrate to all of the population, and it's no coincidence that many of these buildings have religious significance, of course. But the planning to show that you're not alone, I showed the sewerage system of Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley. This was built nearly 7,000 years ago and was more sophisticated than anything in Europe until about 1800. Good planning, expectations of the size of an urban population, and being able to provide stability are the fundamental tools that allow cities and civilization to survive and grow. And over the past, we can see how innovation has brought things that we again think we are the pioneers of, things like hydroelectric power. I show two platforms from 1,500 years ago to show we are not the first people who've had to try and work out how to deal with a changing climatic landscape around us. Delivering water supplies to very substantial cities has been a problem ever since late antiquity, if not before. Working out how to harness and manage the countryside has been central to enabling cities to grow. And we heard about Guangzhou already this morning and Marco Polo. At that time, 800 years ago, the ability to provide port facilities that allow the loading and disloading of hundreds of ships at a time requires sophistication and requires forward thought. And it's important to realise that cities can also grow and be born. Those of you who've been to Astana will have seen the transformation of a small little village into a gleaming Central Asian capital city over the last 20 years, as was the case in Venice around about 800, a small swampy lagoon that grew to be one of the most important cities in the world, or Merv in Turkmenistan, that 1,000 years ago was probably the single largest inhabited city in the world, and today is lost. So at this time in the early 21st century, when we are aware that we are living at a time of transition, of climate change, of a rise of ideologies, of rapid growth in China, Southeast Asia and South Asia, and a shift of the economic and political normality, the normal way that things have looked for decades and centuries, where the West has been involved in leading and shaping the world, we're looking at a whole set of new challenges. The primary one, having talked about globalization being ancient and old and the challenges of the past, that the main issue for me as a historian is the speed at which change is happening, which makes your decisions, your planning, even much more important. Because the population rises that we're talking about fundamentally across the One Belt One Road countries have removed not only the obstacles to travel that I mentioned, but the obstacle to climate has been shattered. The cities of the One Belt One Road could only grow to a certain size. In the past, cities could only grow as large as their hinterland could support. Now, when you can bring in goods, materials, food from far away, where you're able to supply cities without the barrier of having to supply only from the location that surrounds it, cities are able to grow much larger than their natural environments will allow. And if you look at the map that I have put up here, you'll see that these barriers of the tundra, of the climate, of the water shortages have been ones that have provided challenges in the past, but those obstacles to prevent continuous growth have now been removed. Of course, that provides problems for the world's population as the demographics start to grow fundamentally and above all in Africa, but also in Asia, where you'll see again the rise of the megacity, the concentration almost all in the One Belt, One Road countries. The success of the One Belt, One Road, the success of the global economies will rest and fall on the ability of you and those like you in other cities in other parts of the world to successfully manage both the economic and the environmental sustainability of urban growth in the 21st century. Rapid urbanization brings with it other problems that it's important that you acknowledge and note, because history will teach you that large-scale cities don't just breed the good things of trade and prosperity and tolerance, they are also vectors for the spread of disease. They are also vectors for the spread and rise of of ideas that can be damaging and difficult and challenging for political systems to cope with. Rapidly rising populations in Russia in 1917, particularly in Petrograd as it was in Moscow, were fundamental to the toppling over of regime change and towards anarchy. The kinds of issues that you're looking at of sanitation, medical care, and so on will be central to how not just the successful but the unsuccessful in these cities will feel and cope and manage over decades to come. So it's a very important 2 days for you all here. It's an honour that I can come and share a few thoughts about the past and the challenges as I see them for the future. But the one word of reassurance I would give you is that you're not the first people to be facing these challenges, and nor are you the first people to gather and talk to each other about the challenges of the past. In the old days, city leaders from all sorts of areas across the spine of Asia would regularly meet together to compare notes, and you are following in their very proud footsteps. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Frankopan, for setting the stage in the right historical context and emphasizing the importance of transportation corridor like the One Belt, One Road had over the centuries in terms of enriching the lives of people, not only economically, but also in terms of the exchanges, the contribution to creativity, to arts, to culture, and so on. Now I think that is from this starting point we would like to move on with interventions by our panel of speakers here. I will simply propose to simply follow the alignment that is here on the dais and give the floor now to Mr. Sun Jiaokun, who is the chairman of the board of supervisors of the China-Africa Development Fund, and that is an important partner for many of the countries along the region and for Africa as well. We at UNIDO are proud to cooperate with them. We have a memorandum of understanding that was signed a few months ago, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce then Dr. Sun and invite him to deliver his 5-minute statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, please allow me to give you a brief account of the China-African Development Fund, which I represent. This fund, its establishment was announced by the then President of China, Mr. Hu Jintao. It was established in 2006. It was initiated by the State Development Bank with the basic scale of fund to be around $5 billion. The purpose is to support the investment of the Chinese enterprises to Africa. Up to now, the fund has decided to make an investment project of 88 projects to 36 countries in Africa. The total investment scale exceeded $4 billion. It will lead to a total amount of $17 billion of total amount for China's investment to Africa. First, I'd like to talk about our real lines of business. I'd like to make 4 points observations with regard to the 2030 SDGs. First of all, for the 2030 agenda, this highly matches our positioning in business. As a program of actions leading the next 15 years for the world development, this 2030 agenda focus a lot more on improving the developing countries, the member states, its internal development capacity and its ability to make blood, and this will help them to create a good economic recycling cycle to put them on the road of sustainable development. My bank is the world's largest development financial institution. It is also the largest international financing cooperative bank. Its total international balance for international business exceeded $340 billion. The purpose is for the developments, is for the provision of long-term stable credit and funds to the developing countries in their construction and development. This fund we support to establish is for the purpose of supporting the Chinese enterprises to make direct investment to help the African countries to improve their capacity for self-development. Secondly, Africa is the important link for the achievement of SDGs in the world. The shortage of funds is the major challenge faced by Africa. Africa is the country with the largest concentration of developing countries. The realization of SDGs is largely dependent on the process of economic and social development in Africa. At present, the prominent issues in economic growth and transformation in the African countries is the lack of funds. First of all, the public departments in Africa it's hard for them to get the necessary large amount of funds for the construction of infrastructure. It is estimated the Sub-Saharan Africa lack $50 billion in terms of the funds for the construction of infrastructure. Also, a lot of African countries are having single economic structure, and they still cannot get the sufficient large amount of funds for their development. Thirdly, the development financing and direct investment is an important means to solve this fund shortage, and this will help them to sustain their development. Development financing has always been unique in the international global economic development. Practice has proved, regardless whether we're talking about World Bank, Asian Development Bank, or the state development banks, these organizations, financial institutions, are helping a lot to help the developing countries to solve their shortage, the issue of funds shortage, and this will help the economic developments for their promotion. We have provided over $30 billion in terms of funds to over 40 countries in Africa, and this will help them to realize their urbanization, industrialization, and will help them to self-develop. And this fund is taking the means of equity financing without increasing the debt burdens of Africa. We provide the necessary the funds needed by Africa that is urgently needed by them. This will help them to sustain their developments. We have directly provided 70,000 direct job opportunities and 1.17 million indirect job opportunities. And this has benefited over millions local population by helping the local communities increase their export by over $2 billion. In 2013, China proposed the One Belt, One Road proposal. The purpose is to promote the flow of the factors among different countries, to talk to each other, to integrate their industries, and this will help to have a coordinated and balanced development in their economy, society, and environment. In December 2015, on the Johannesburg Summit, China-Africa Cooperation Summit, Chinese government announced a plan to provide a total package of funds of $60 billion, and also this has increased another $50 billion to this fund, which we organize, so that the scale for our funds has amounted to $10 billion. This has created better conditions for our cooperations with Africa. To increase our cooperation with Africa, to deepen the economic integration for sustainable development is our joint responsibility. We would like to work with you and make new contributions to the world and Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sun Xiaoqun, for bringing in the financing and economic perspective. So we started in a broad historical setting. We move on now to the economic realities and the impact that a vehicle like the One Belt, One Road initiative may have on the lives of the communities living along the road. I would like now to give the floor to a sister UN agency, that's the UN World Tourism Organization, and Ms. Alla Peresolova is head of the Silk Road program at the World Tourism Organization. Please, you have the floor.
Hello, everybody. Can I have the clicker as well? Hello, everybody. Can I have my presentation, please? I have a very difficult task because I'm going to talk about the very cross-sectoral activity at tourism. And well, UNWTO started to work on the concept of Silk Road tourism some 20 years ago, along with the sister organizations like UNESCO, UNDP, and UNEP. 6 years ago, a special program of UNWTO was established, the Silk Road program, that I'm very privileged to be in charge of. Well, to put it in the perspective, I would like to share with you the recent quote from the Forbes magazine, International, that published that the Silk Road is one of the world's most powerful brands, perhaps even bigger than Disney or Coca-Cola. The study that UNWTO carried on 300,000 social networks, chats, blogs where the travelers discussed their travel experience showed that 30% of the travelers' conversations, when they speak about the route travel, it's about the Silk Road. So it makes the Silk Road the top world's travel route and experience. UNWTO, as I mentioned, has been working on the Silk Road since some 20 years ago, and when the program was established 6 years ago, we introduced the 2-year Silk Road action plans. Actually, SDGs naturally translate into our Silk Road action plan through its 3 key areas: marketing and promotion, destination management, and capacity building and travel facilitation. It's downloadable from our website if you're interested to have a copy. We are working with 33 committed member states. Have a look at this incredible mosaic of destinations across 3 continents. It's really, well, Peter Frankopan mentioned that incredible historic, cultural, and natural wealth that this destination, which is called Silk Road, has. The Silk Road community of countries is growing. Over the last few years, we had few countries joining. The last ones were Romania and Spain. And these countries find special interest, to cooperation along the Silk Road. And actually, the Silk Road program of UNWTO in the first place is a collaborative platform to drive the sustainable development of tourism along the ancient routes. We work with a very wide range of stakeholders, with the governments, but also with the private sector and academia. We have a working body, which is called the UNWTO Silk Road Task Force, that constitutes of the official representatives of the tourism governments of the countries, but also the private sector. I will just mention a few collaborative initiatives that we have in each area. We work with in marketing and promotion, we work with a very wide number of supporters and partners, from the major international exhibitions to very high-profile media that helps us to raise the global profile of the Silk Road tourism. I will mention just one recent project that we are so proud of. We worked with Silk Road countries that I mentioned there and Discovery Channel on the David Battiel, he's a very famous UK comedian and presenter, traveling along the Silk Road. Well, it is aired nowadays around the world, and we expect the outreach of almost 3 billion subscribers in 220 countries. We also work to enhance or enlarge the markets of intelligence along the Silk Road. Actually, the Silk Road cities play a very special role for us, because these are the hubs on the Silk Road which the travelers consider as one of the top travel experiences. We also work to build the to build the capacities of the tourism institutions along the Silk Road. We have a number of schemes for training of tour operators, but also guides. And I'm very pleased to see here the president of the World Federation of Tourist Guides Associations. Felicitas, please raise the hand. They are our dear partners for a very important framework that we have together with UNESCO to create the pools of national guides, trainers along the Silk Road, so to enhance the interpretation of the Silk Road, which will result in the better travelers' experience in the end. We also work in the area of travel facilitation. Our Secretary General lobbies the governments at the highest possible level when he meets the presidents of the countries. The first things he speaks about is visa procedures, travel facilitation in general. We also partner with UBM routes, you know, the air connectivity and open skies policies on the Silk Road. We run a number of events every year, like our ministers' meeting on the Silk Road happens on the second day of the ITB Berlin, the major travel trade fair. We also collaborate with the World Tourism Market, World Travel Market in London, and just, you know, in a few weeks in November we'll have a special annual seminar on social networks along the Silk Road. I would like to finish, I think, you know, my time is over, yes? Yeah. So, to conclude, I would like to say that the Silk Road countries have, they are in a unique position to leverage from each other by collaborating in endless areas within tourism, like cross-marketing, product development, tourism route development, travel facilitation, poverty reduction, and so on and so forth. So, and UNWTO Silk Road program is focused on that and, you know, facilitates this. I would like to end with the inspirational picture of the youngest eagle hunter from Mongolia, because I'm coming from Mongolia now. Yesterday I arrived from Mongolia from a very interesting, exciting and inspirational conference that we organized there on nomadic tourism and sustainable cities. We were talking about how tourism can help to preserve the unique lifestyles and at the same time help the local communities to improve their living standards and safeguard their lifestyle. So thank you very much. If anybody wants to talk to me well, about possible cooperation, please come up anytime. I'm around for the whole day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Peresolova. It must be very nice working for the World Tourism Organization. It sounds like an interesting job that you have there. Now I would like to give the floor to our host country here, Austria, and Dr. Michael Postel, who is the head Department of Multilateral Economic Relations at the Federal Ministry for Europe, Integration and Foreign Affairs in Austria. And I understand that Mr. Postel has lived in the Central Europe and Central Asia region, so he brings in the experience of this part of the Silk Road. Please.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to the organizer, UNIDO, and the co-organizer. From the Austrian perspective, and I'm talking now from a current position, which is Director on Multilateral Trade, and also dealing with regional strategy, I'd like to bridge the gap between the theme of the session, interregional strategies, and what the key speaker said about the importance and the historical importance of the Silk Road. And he rightly pointed out that currently there is a lot of instability on this road, and obviously this is an issue that from the foreign ministry perspective we are very much engaged and looking to improve that. Last year's refugee crisis has shown us once more again how interconnected this world is. From the Austrian and obviously also from the European perspective, the Mediterranean and the Western Balkan region play an important role in this respect. Poverty, inequality and despair are also the breeding ground for terrorism and extremism. However, globalization, which has been somehow discredited in recent times, has given us many opportunities to tackle the new global challenges and to overcome them. Two of them are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and China's One Belt, One Road initiative, which are both an important political signal of hope and a master plan for a peaceful future without poverty. The SDG and the BRI are mutually supportive development agendas. In fact, BRI can and should be made into the world's first regional attempt to implement the SDGs. To be achieved, the SDGs require a revolution in economic planning, political cooperation, business leadership, and technological advancement. If the SDGs and BRI can be successfully integrated, a new form of multilateralism will have been created. This new model will combine the best of the United Nations, including global consensus around future direction, and the best of China's growing leadership in the world, namely a focus on long-term investments and infrastructure development, both in the rural and urban areas. In doing so, BRI can prove to be a new and innovative form of multilateralism for the 21st century, one that focuses on solving the most pressing sustainable development challenges of the world. The world will also have a blueprint for similar regional initiatives for sustainable development. The southern arm of the One Belt, One Road initiative is expected to be routed through southeastern Europe, both in its maritime as well as eventually in its terrestrial route. The branch of the logistical corridor will link the Asian part of the route into Europe. At this stage, these plans, and in particular the routes through the Western Balkans, are still to be fully developed. The exact route of the corridor, its modal components, rail, road, maritime routes, the level and typology of investment are still to be defined. Investment along the Belt and Road Initiative could have a significant impact on Southeast European economies by creating new opportunities through increased connectivity and opening up to new markets. Connecting markets and cities within the region and to the rest of Europe will lead to stronger trade integration, encouraging economic growth, and increasing the competitiveness of local enterprises and small and medium-sized enterprises in particular. There are several elements that will help ensure the mutual benefits of the SDGs and BRI. First, a clear coordination structure should be created between the UN, the government of China, and the various regional actors in order to ensure the sustainability of BRI. For Europe, one of those regional actors could be the Central European Initiative that encompasses 18 countries both within the European Union and countries aspiring membership of the European Union. Talking about the European Union, also the macro-regional strategies can play an important role. Second, BRI should drive the need for all countries and cities in the region to develop long-term SDG implementation and investment strategies to ensure that proposed BRI projects are aligned with sustainable development. This is in particular important for energy and infrastructure projects. Third, local financial institutions and saving pools, commercial banks, pension funds, insurance firms, and sovereign wealth funds throughout the BRI region should be activated for investment in related projects. Fourth, regional universities and think tanks should play a central role in developing the policy frameworks, research agendas, and cross-cultural exchanges that will be needed for the success of BRI. And let me again mention here the role the Central European Initiative can play. Fifth, but not least, BRI must keep in mind the social development of the region. Large-scale infrastructure investments are very powerful tools for economic development, particularly when they connect urban areas. However, they need to be mirrored with social policies and oversight that ensures no corruption, fair labor standards, proper environmental oversight, and other related aspects. Finally, let me focus on SMEs. There are numerous challenges to SMEs to take advantage of trade and growth opportunity that may arise with the One Belt, One Road initiative. SMEs can improve their own opportunities by taking advantage of know-how available to raise their quality standards, gain international certifications, and identify export markets. On the other hand, there is a role also for the national and regional authorities. Among other things, reducing custom barriers and facilitating trade and logistics across borders in the region would offer SMEs a larger market in which to trade. This reform agenda fits with the Berlin process of regional integration spearheaded by the European Union. The EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, can assist in continuing to provide advice and finance for small businesses in meeting these challenges, but also can provide policy advice and finance to facilitate cross-border flows of trade and investment. With the aim to help SMEs to benefit from the BRI, governments along the initiative can make efforts in the following aspects. Firstly, undertake policy dialogues to remove trade and investment barriers existing in customs clearance, inspection and quarantine, in particular to simplify domestic bureaucratic procedures. Secondly, provide incentives to SMEs by the means of preferential tariff treatment, setting up comprehensive information platform, and encouraging big companies to involve SMEs into its business operation. Finally, promote experience sharing by organizing field tours for domestic SMEs to visit their counterparts in China or other countries. In conclusion, common prosperity, achieving common prosperity, narrowing the regional income gaps is important to promote stability and to fight today's challenges. If they are based on the SDGs and on the One Belt and One Road initiative, they can play an important role to guide us in the right direction. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Postel, for this very strong statement on the links between the Belt Road Initiative on the one hand and the SDGs on the other hand. And so all the more important that it comes from our host country here, the Foreign Ministry, and from a country that has a history of strong engagement with Central Europe and Central Asia, part of the One Belt, One Road Initiative. Now I would like to move on to another member of the UN family and call in Ms. Cristina Pina, who is from UNDP. She currently works as policy advisor for global and regional partnerships at UNDP out of their Beijing office, I understand. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, UNIDO colleagues, for inviting us. It's a very key and timely event today, so we are very pleased to be here and to participate in such an important discussion. I'm Cristina Pina, policy advisor in the Global and Regional Partnership at the United Nations Development Programme in the China Country Office. And today I will speak about I will try to be very brief, and I will speak about the China's Belt and Road Initiative and the potential that this initiative can have in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and how UNDP is engaging in this initiative. As you know, UNDP is the head of the United Nations Development Group and plays an important role in the implementation of the SDGs together with all the other UN agencies. And UNDP plays a role both at global level but also a country level, in particular through the MAPS approach. UNDP China in particular supports China's positive engagement in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at country level, but also in the role that China can play in international development cooperation. We know that China made great achievement with the Millennium Development Goals, and we believe that China can really play a crucial role in the implementation of the SDGs. Our role at UNDP China is focused on the traditional areas of UNDP: poverty, equity and governance, and also environment and energy, disaster management, and an area that is growing very fast in the last years in South-South and global cooperation. When looking at China and the role that China has on the global stage, indeed, we all agree China is an emerging power. It's one of the biggest economies in the world and has contributed substantively to the global economy in the past decades. But China, from our perspective, is also a bridge builder in terms of because it's still the biggest developing country in the world, and so and it's leading the alignment of the domestic with the global agenda. But China is also leading other initiatives, such as the creation of new financial institution. I refer to the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the New Development Bank. So it can play really a role in the harmonization of the old and new institution. And last but not least, China foreign policy focus is still very much oriented on the other developing countries. So those are all very important elements that determine the role that China can have, will have also in the Belt and Road Initiative. If we look at the SDGs in particular, we need to remember how China is one of the first 22 countries who participate at the volunteer national reviews at the United Nations High-Level Political Forum. And 1 month ago, for the first time during the G20, and the G20 that this year was hosted by China, the G20 action plan for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development has been approved and adopted. So these are the elements that make us understand why the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a China-led initiative, has a big potential for the implementation of the SDGs, especially if we think about that the majority of the Belt and Road countries are emerging countries or developing countries. With this spirit, UNDP has signed a memorandum of understanding with the with the government of China last September 19 at the margin of the UN General Assembly. The objective of this MOU is to strengthen the sustainable development aspect of the BRI. Is indeed to promote the overall human development and common prosperity of the countries along the Belt and Road, including China, the recalibrating of the economy and the growth in a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient way, and especially in ensuring that large infrastructure and investment projects can be sustainable both in social and environmental terms. This MOU has 5 areas of cooperation, from enhanced knowledge, information, innovation and technology exchange to identification and implementation of pilot projects, strengthen policy coordination and communication among all the other Belt and Road countries, build partnership both with private sector but also with local communities, and enhance capacity building. How will UNDP engage in this initiative, and how will be the action plan of this MOU be implemented? And there are 4 areas where UNDP will work. The first one is in convening and facilitating. We are actually in 3 weeks from now organizing the first Regional Development Cooperation Forum and Business Dialogue with Belt and Road government officials, UNDP country offices, business leaders, international experts, and other UN agencies. A second part will use our global presence with more than 170 country offices around the world to provide country information to make sure that the project that will be implemented under the BRI will actually match the needs of the recipient countries. Third will be providing knowledge products. We are currently working on 4 research papers. One is 4 research paper on the, let's say, general framework on how we can build a shared vision in the implementation of the SDGs along the Belt and Road countries, and on how we can underline and highlight what are exactly the linkages between connectivity, which is the pillar of the Belt and Road, and its economic, but especially social and environmental sustainable elements. And last but not least is the pilot project identification and scale up. Regarding this area where we would like to work, we identified 8 major themes that include but are not limited to the following. First of all is on sustainable infrastructure, and the idea is to develop a regional framework in line with what UNDP has adopted last year regarding the social and environmental standards. Second will be greening the Belt and Road, which is connected to the global environmental fund and green climate fund projects, and is also that is let's say focused mainly on energy, transport, but also infrastructure. And this is also connected to the third point, which is on urbanization planning, but we will add to this point a very strong focus on governance. Cross-border cooperation in terms of policy, in terms of partnership, private sector engagement, and then promoting human capacity development and leadership training with a strong focus on gender, social cohesion in enhancing the engagement of local communities, but also NGOs, and last but not least, for sure, is an area related to disaster management and disaster risk reduction. With this, I will conclude, and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Christina. Clearly, with its global footprint, there is much that UNDP can contribute and support as the huge Belt and Road Initiative moves on. Now, before moving on to the next speaker, I have a point of order to pass on to the attendants. That's the interpretation, unfortunately, will have to stop at this point. They operate under very strict time schedules. We thank them for their contribution so far, and we hope that those of you who will not be able to follow the rest of the debates in English will bear with us. Right now, I would like to invite Mr. Renaud Soriol, who again represents another facet of the One Belt, One Road initiative. This time there's the international law perspective, international trade law. So, Mr. Soriol, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As the representative of another organization based in Vienna, it is a great pleasure for me to greet all of you and to express my sincere appreciation to UNIDO and other organizers of this event for inviting the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law to participate in this event. UNCITRAL is the core legal body in the United Nations system that handles international trade and commercial law issues. The International Trade Law Division of the Office of Legal Affairs functions as the substantive secretariat of UNCITRAL, and it is based here in Vienna along with other entities. Established by the General Assembly of the United Nations in 1966, our commission is another one of those celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. At a global level, we continue, after all these years, to further the progressive harmonization and modernization of international trade law through the preparation of conventions, model laws, legislative guides, and other international legal standards. Over the past 50 years, UNCITRAL has been focusing on the modernization and the harmonization of rules governing international trade transactions and business. My comments today will focus briefly on the legal infrastructure required for the One Belt, One Road initiative to succeed. According to the action plan announced in 2015, the One Belt, One Road initiative, and I quote, is open for cooperation. It is open to all countries and international and regional organizations for engagement so that the results of the concerted efforts will benefit wider areas, close quote. A key feature distinguishing this initiative from others is its flexibility and openness. Let me share with you some thoughts on how UNCITRAL can contribute to that process. In order for the initiative to have maximum impact on cross-border trade and investment, it needs to consider and address the divergence in legal traditions that exist among states along the One Belt and the One Road. Quite simply, divergence in legal traditions result in obstacles to trade. Those same obstacles are intended by the General Assembly to be addressed through UNCITRAL, and that was the reason why in 1966 UNCITRAL was established. Quite simply, for example, what would be the law governing a contract for the sale of goods when the parties operate in different countries? Will arbitral awards and other decisions rendered in one state be enforceable and recognized in another? Will the law governing public procurement along the road allow for more competition? How will it be possible for businesses to obtain credit in cross-border situations? And here I would note that UNCITRAL texts and standards have been expressly mentioned as part of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda on Financing for Development. So conventions, model laws, and other international legal standards developed by UNCITRAL provide possible solutions to these questions. And because such standards were developed with universal participation from member states of the United Nations, as well as international, intergovernmental, and non-governmental organizations with relevant expertise, they are meant to be adaptable in different legal traditions. And they have a proven track record in that respect. We must not forget that the One Belt, One Road initiative aims at connecting over 60 countries with very different legal systems and legal culture, and that flexibility needs to be preserved. It would probably be impossible to have one uniform legal framework governing all parts and all countries covered by the initiative. However, efforts should be made to harmonize laws that govern trade and investment, or at a minimum, provide legal interoperability of the rules applying along the road. Just to focus on one example, given the likely increase of commercial and investment activities owing to the initiative, commercial disputes, are likely to arise. It may not be possible to resort to domestic courts for a variety of reasons, or the competence of such courts may be unacceptable. There will therefore be need for a mechanism to resolve such disputes through arbitration, mediation, or other alternative methods. The UNCITRAL Model Law on International Commercial Arbitration is designed to assist states in reforming and modernizing their laws on arbitral procedure so as to take into account the particular features and needs of international commercial arbitration. The New York Convention on the Recognition and Enforcement of Foreign Arbitral Awards provides for the recognition of foreign arbitral awards, and most states are in the One Belt, One Road area are already parties to the New York Convention. At this point, I would simply like to draw your attention to an opinion promulgated by the Supreme People's Court of China in July 2015, dealing, among others, with dispute resolution in the context of the initiative. In its opinion, the court indicated strong support towards the use of international commercial and maritime arbitration for resolving cross-border disputes arising from the initiative. Specifically, it pointed out that foreign arbitral awards relating to the initiative should be promptly recognized and enforced in accordance with the law. That is exactly the same message that could be expected and could be heard from UNCITRAL. The track record of UNCITRAL along the road is not insignificant, and in addition to the New York Convention, I would say that other building blocks of a more integrated legal environment are already in place along the road, including in China. However, it's not only a question for UNCITRAL to promote its instruments along the One Belt and the One Road. It is also a question of increasing participation of countries along the road in the making of future trade law. For example, in the field of mediation, UNCITRAL has a model law on international commercial conciliation, and it is currently preparing an instrument for the enforcement of settlement agreements reached through such mediation. It would be quite useful if those states crossed by the One Belt, One Road initiative could be equally active and all take part in such rule-making processes at UNCITRAL. To be quite practical, I'd like to introduce a range of technical assistance and capacity building activities undertaken by UNCITRAL worldwide to promote its work and the use and adoption of the legislative and non-legislative texts it has developed. As the first ever UNCITRAL regional presence, the Regional Centre for Asia and the Pacific, currently running from Incheon in Korea, is now well into its fifth year of operation. Since its establishment, the Regional Centre has promoted UNCITRAL texts and provided support services to states in the region in collaboration with international and regional bodies active in trade law reform in the region. More efforts are underway, interestingly enough, in China and in Africa, to establish more of an UNCITRAL regional and domestic presence. In a sense, UNCITRAL has already started establishing its own road to connect the Far East and Central Europe and other regions, and thus we hope that collaboration with this initiative will be fruitful. One last word in closing. As an organization based in Vienna, we look forward to expanded cooperation with UNIDO as partners in furthering the Sustainable Development Goals. There are various areas where cooperation could be sought and increased, and with the expertise that UNCITRAL brings in various fields of trade and commercial law, I would guess that the two organizations will complement each other in areas of common interest. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Sorel, for bringing in this fundamental issue of the interoperability of the different legal systems at a time when the movement of people, goods and services across the countries are likely to expand with the BRI initiative. I would like now to move to another type of intergovernmental institution and to call Mr. Manuel Montes, Senior Advisor of Finance Development at the South Centre in Geneva, Switzerland. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schulte. First, let me thank UNIDO for inviting us to present in this important meeting. I come from the South Centre. It is an intergovernmental body. We have 53 member countries, but all of them are developing countries. I mean, just to compare it to the OECD has 34 member countries, so we say we are much bigger than they are, right? So, I mean, we have countries like Brazil and China that are members of the South Centre. And we actually work on climate change, trade, finance, intellectual property issues in support of the developing country interest, right? And today I have 3 main points. I know I have only 5 minutes, right? And I want just to go through this. And I guess the first thing I want to say before I even start is what struck me about, and unfortunately he's not here anymore, Professor Franco Pan's presentation is that it reminded me of a paper I wrote 5 years ago with a Russian colleague, actually, which looked at 1500, right? In which Asia was 1/2 of the world's GDP in 1500. And between 1500 and now, something happened, right? By 1900, Asia was only less than 10% of the world's GDP. And one of the things that I found striking, looking at all these long-term trends, is that the One Belt, One Road initiative might be a way in which you could think as a peaceful rebalancing. I know there's a lot of violence in many of the parts of the Silk Road, right now. But if the rebalancing continues in the same vein, right, it could be, right, and in my talk we can talk a little bit about the problems that might arise out of this. It might be a way of rebalancing again the world economy, in which Asia was one half of the world, right? India was not yet a country like what it is now, but India, China, and whatever was then now was one half of the world, and now maybe there's a way in which this One Belt, One Road initiative could provide this peaceful rebalancing. So the first point I wanted to make is that the One Belt, One Road effort should promote South-South cooperation, right? Just because a developing country is a leader in a development-oriented project does not mean it's an instance of South-South cooperation. We are working with the South-South unit here very strongly with respect to the issue of cooperation in climate change. South-South cooperation is actually a work in progress among developing countries. The view of India, because these are our member states, right? The view of India, the view of South Africa, the view of Brazil are very different from each other, right? What we know, and what developing countries insist, is that it has to be different from North-South cooperation. But what is South-South cooperation? Well, developing countries have proposed some principles, and some of them are actually in the handout of the One Belt, One Road initiative. It's mutual respect for each other's sovereignty, territorial integrity, mutual non-aggression, mutual non-interference in each other's internal affairs, and equity and mutual benefit and peaceful coexistence. It reminds me actually of a struggle that happened in the aid effectiveness debate, right? When there was an attempt by developing countries to remove policy conditionality, right? This is not loan conditionality, policy conditionality, and it failed, right? So, in effect, the aid effectiveness debate, sort of the way I see it, has wound down because of the inability to rebalance, right? To rebalance the politics of aid conditionality. Projects in the South-South cooperation have to recognize and incorporate the realities of developing countries involved. For example, many have weak balance of payments conditions, and actually now many countries are beginning to wade into debt crisis and balance of payments problems. This requires adequate attention to the fact that projects should provide adequate foreign exchange inflows into the participating countries. And one of the ways this can be done is by putting some attention to employing local labor and sourcing local supplies as much as possible, right? That was the first point. It is going to be an effort to make the Belt and Road Initiative a truly South-South cooperation effort. And we actually are working with the Institute for World Economics and Politics of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and our co-researchers there see the problems with there are many problems of coordination and making sure that it actually becomes a mutually beneficial project. The second point I wanted to make is that the Belt Road Initiative has a very strong possibilities for trade and investment. Of course, there are many precedents for this, right? Most countries that will participate in the Belt Road Initiative are not even middle-income countries. And we know in Asia, a lot of middle-income countries, and also in Latin America, are actually stuck in what economists call the middle-income trap. They are unable to industrialize much faster, right? So, and the provision of infrastructure is a powerful approach to mobilizing development forces in the local areas. Actually, one example I always give about industrialization is in the United States, because we know that because of the lot of effort of our African colleagues, SDG 9 became a sustainable development goal. That's industrialization. The African governments actually pushed for industrialization to be a part of the sustainable development goals, because the developed countries really wanted only poverty reduction, right? Why should the industrial policy be involved in this kind of an effort? Well, the example I give is from the United States, and it is called the Tennessee Valley Authority. It's a very large government corporation. I think one of the previous speakers, Mr. Sun, talked about the importance of government leadership, right? And the Tennessee Valley Authority was charged with modernizing navigation, flood control, electricity generation, fertilizer manufacturing, economic development in the Tennessee Valley in the middle of the Great Depression. The Tennessee Valley was in very poor shape, even compared to the other states that were in the Depression. 30% of the population was affected by malaria, and the average income was less than 5% of the average income of the rest of the United States, with some families surviving as little as $100 per year. What the TVA did was to increase incomes and to provide the kinds of infrastructure that poor people needed. Just to give one quick example, because I don't have time, what the electricity provided to rural areas was the ability of farmers to store butter, right? And because they could store butter, then they could sell the butter to other markets, right? And this is the kind of possibilities that the Belt Road Initiative can provide to the region in which it will be affected. So the Belt Road Initiative has the potential to cause these drastic changes if these gains are widely dispersed. So again, the challenge is to make sure that the gains are widely dispersed in the area. My final point, right? It is very important, and I think my previous speakers have also spoken about this, that the software dimensions of the Belt Road Initiative be looked at, including tourism and cultural development. It cannot be confined to providing physical facilities. It can include legal development. It should emphasize economic, social, and political connectivity. Of course, as we know from the very first speaker, from Francophone Pence, the Silk Road tradition is very strong, right? I mean, or at least in the minds of people, right? It seemed that there was some kind of thing there, right? The modernization of this connection should result in even stronger relationships between the peoples living in the region. We can contrast this approach, let me contrast it with the Western colonial approach, into many poor regions, which actually resulted in dislocation and conflict among native populations and between native populations and colonial power. There is some idle discussion in, China is a big country, right? There are some idle discussions among African colleagues that say if there had not been that much colonialism in Africa, maybe there would be bigger countries in Africa, right? But it's these kinds of historical things that developing countries have to overcome. It is important that the introduction of projects be also an occasion for the exchange of ideas. I think I'm not saying anything new, but this is an important point I wanted to make. Familiarity among government officials and private sectors across countries. This is the software. This is the software I call of the One Belt, One Road. And it has the potential to be as long-lasting as the infrastructure that will be introduced. The Chinese government, for example, has set up a scholarship for studies in China. I think it's a good start. But because it guarantees reaching down to the younger people who will inherit the infrastructure, right? But it's also important to connect the societies through regularly scheduled events, right? For example, a conference on economic issues. The challenges of economic development among different countries could be one approach, right? But it should be a regular conference. It cannot be an ad hoc conference. It has to be one in which there is a regular schedule that countries can depend on. And it's not just, I'm an economist, it's not just economists that can get together, and I think this was also brought up in a previous suggestion, but sociologists, anthropologists, political scientists could actually begin forming their own associations within the building, within the scaffolding of the One Belt, One Road project, right? It's important that these meetings be regularly scheduled, and therefore it is something that it's not just, in a sense, we're not talking to China too, right? We're talking to all the countries that would be involved in this kind of initiative to start building these kinds of software connections. Given the state of the world economy, with declining global potential output and low and negative interest rates, One Belt, One Road is indeed a timely intervention. Making the vision work is a matter of effort, efficiency, and goodwill on the part of the participating governments and populations. Let me stop there, but let me just say one more time. I was thinking, as I listened to your presentation, it could be, there's no guarantee, a peaceful rebalancing of the global economy because of the growth, because of the rise of Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Montes, for bringing in the very important dimension of South-South cooperation. That is an area in which we at UNIDO are investing a lot of resources also, and in fact we are mainstreaming into much of our technical cooperation activities. Now I would like to invite Mr. Ahmed Darwish, Chairman of the General Authority for the Suez Canal Economic Zone in Egypt, with the difficult task of bringing to a close this very long and enriching list of speakers, please.
Well, thank you very much actually for giving me the chance to share with you some of our ideas and getting me to be on this distinguished panel. The last speaker could be looked upon as a disadvantage because everything has been said, but it could be looked upon also that it's an advantage that I could finish very quickly. But actually I will take a different perspective, because when I saw on the agenda I'm the last, I decided to take a different perspective, that I'm going to use our Suez Canal Zone as a case study, because we talked about several issues. The Suez Canal Zone actually is an important, let's say, waterway along the belt. And one way of looking at things, actually, to get things to happen quickly, actually, is that we have to go back to the basics. And the basics actually include, at the heart of this thing is the governance. If we want to do things quickly, then maybe it might not be actually the government way of doing things. So one way we have done actually in Egypt to set up the Suez Canal Economic Zone is actually to give it the independence and the autonomous thing. So the board of directors is looked upon as if they are the cabinet of the board, so we have flexibility in terms of how to take decisions. And this actually immediately reflected on the policies and the business models that we can adapt, because actually we have the flexibility of looking at the business models in a different way and creating innovative business models and getting different business models to work in different cases, because there isn't one size that fits all. So that's the basis. If we move to the tools, there are several items I would like to talk about in the tools. The infrastructure has been emphasized, but a very important question is, are we still looking at the classic infrastructure? I don't think so. If we're targeting 2030 and 2035, we should look into a whole different way of designing, acquiring, building, and financing our infrastructure. Because we're not designing for today. So the regular, actually classic, I'm a computer engineer by the way, the classic way of actually setting a power network, or actually the pipes for water and water treatment, will not actually be the state of what we need in 2030 and 2035. So we have to think in a different way. There is an initiative that's called Smart Cities, Smart Industrial Zones, Smart whatever, but this is not yet actually fully crystallized to understand what is needed. Connectivity is also very important, and I think so much have been talked about connectivity. And in UNIDO, I will not be actually, talking about trade agreements. Trade agreements are important, but they are still actually bilateral. There are still actually many of them that are done in an old-fashioned way. Financing is one of the important tools that we have to look upon, and I don't think actually that the way banks are working and the way that financing institutes are working actually will be the way to do things, because we still one more time need to work on new tools, and we are working on new tools in the Zoom. I talked very quickly and I'm talking fast, but I don't worry now because there's no translation. I usually try to talk slower so that I don't give the translators a hard time. But I would like to stop on the next one on my what I call tools. If we are talking about sustainability, then we really have to talk about youth and youth employment, because this is what's going to make things sustainable. His Excellency from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs actually mentioned lots of the instabilities along this belt and road and things. Usually, they say the following: if we have stability, we have less terrorism, investment will flourish. I would like to tell you it's exactly the opposite. We have actually to inject investment, we have to bring jobs, because bringing jobs is what's going to bring stability. Those youth are frustrated, they are jobless, and in some of these countries they even have a university degree and they don't find a job. So they are sitting in cafes, they are actually depressed, and it's easily actually to brainwash them and create all these chaos. If we inject investment, we bring more projects, we create jobs, we will bring stability. So it's actually, I'd like to think about it the other way. The last thing actually, it was actually mentioned only twice in the opening session when we started to talk about green. But I mean, there is no way actually we will be talking about sustainability without talking about green. And this is actually a great opportunity, because if we have all this wealth of, initiatives together, wealth of countries working together, I think we have a great opportunity to work on the technology and getting green to be a little bit cheaper and closer to what we call the fossil fuel energy. And it is getting, and it is being competitive. I had the great honor actually to write to UNIDO actually the paper on the relationship between green economy and employment. And is green economy expensive? And actually, no, it's not expensive, and green economy generates employment and generates good quality employment. Last but not least, actually, I would like to highlight what we are doing, since we're talking about the One Belt, One Road and so on with the Chinese. We are actually decided actually to start actually what we call sample case studies. A Chinese company has taken 7 million square meters in the Suez Canal zone, and we started actually to invite Chinese companies to have another hub along the belt. And this is going to be a great idea, because actually, instead of actually moving all the goods and services actually from the Far East actually to Europe, having another hub in the zone actually, with lots of trade agreements that Egypt have. We have 3 trade agreements with Africa. We have a trade agreement with the Middle East and the Arab world. We have our trade agreement with Europe. I think this is going to be to work well. There are already two hubs in Djibouti and Piraeus for the Chinese, where we are currently negotiating with them for a third hub in at the southern entrance of the Suez Canal. So with this, actually, I hope I covered most of the points that I would like to cover. Remains to say that we are open, we are available, we are availing to the world our humble contribution to all the sustainable goals. Thank you very much actually for giving me the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you, Mr. Darwish, for this interesting presentation. I understand now that, and bringing the perspective also of Africa, actually, I see that it's rather on the fringes of the One Belt, One Road, but it's encouraging to hear that there is already quite an important role played by Egypt and the Suez economic zone in contributing to this initiative. Now I understand that we are running out of time. I understand that we are standing between you and your lunch, but somehow I wouldn't want to leave this without giving the audience the opportunity to interact and take advantage of the presence of this impressive lineup of distinguished speakers to raise whatever question you may have, please. Okay, well then I understand it.
You're so explicit.
Exactly. Either we were very clear or you are very hungry. But I would just like then to thank and to solicit your assistance in giving a round of applause to our speakers here. I think that was a very enriching lineup of different subjects that all converge somehow to this One Belt, One Road initiative. And we hope that you have enjoyed the different perspectives that were given now. And we wish you a happy stay here in Vienna during the next few hours. Thank you very much.